Okay, so we're broadcasting, so watch your P's and Q's and be soon.
How do you want to be presented?
Check your sources, guys. Make sure it's working on all the different things.
This is with that new fermentous Saison yeast.
Try that.
You know what I didn't bring? I didn't bring cups.
Okay.
If you want to grab part of the stack.
Bunch of shit in here already. Do you have a preference for later? What's that? Do you have a preference on what you want us to bring out? When? Locals versus foreign.
Yeah, there's 11 people watching, so it's more than just us. There's a bunch of shit there.
You might bring out the like the Roqueforts and the Westmalls, and then kind of maybe go into the actuals. I don't know. I mean, like the locals. Because we got look, if you look here, we got Freaky Deaky. We got Elephant Mall. We got a big bar with Elephant Mall. Community. Then we got Bell Triple, and then there's a Red Suit Triple behind it. Shit, I don't know.
Chris Crowley is watching us.
You're just looking at films that was textbook through my last week.
Yeah, and remind us before you leave. I'll give you a couple packs if you want to play with it.
Maybe if I had another fish rate, I'd put one in the Really?
Then again, that's all talking about.
Yeah.
It's definitely.
That Tommy should have warned you about that. It's not as carbonated as I would like. Just Tuesday, so I'm waiting for carbonate. J-Royd is watching. Stop watching my timer, J-Royd.
Audio's not live yet.
Sure, so my stepdad commented that we got a hot mic.
Do we?
That's what he said, yeah. We got two people on.
I don't have it plugged in, so. No, I can hear me though.
Oh, okay, that's it.
All right, we're gonna go audio live.
Yeah, the comments the same. You can have some of your barbecue raw.
Barbecue pork rinds.
Yum.
I feel honored
Kimchi
and mildly
barbecue
disgusted.
pork rinds? Yeah, that's disgusting, man.
Well, he's on one of those weird diets that's trying to prepare him for surgery.
Yeah. My stepdad says, yeah, we're hearing you loud and clear.
Yeah, we are now, for sure.
Still see the radio station up there.
Who's got their phone on?
Yeah, who is that me?
Sorry, that
it
was
might be me.
That might have been me.
Yeah, it's me too.
I muted mine.
A couple of amateurs in here.
You guys do this weekly?
Yeah,
that's right.
believe it or not, we do. Yeah.
People go missing. That's usually the problem.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Missing.
It's none of this liquid courage.
All right, y'all ready?
Yep. We don't have anything on the screen in here.
Welcome back to Come and Brew It Radio, coming to you from Texas Brewing Inc. in Haltom City, Texas. You can find us on the web at txbrewing.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and share with your friends.
In this episode, we've got Barrett Tillman, the head brewer at Deep Ellum Brewing in Dallas, Texas, in the studio with us to talk about their Labor of Love competition and what's going on at Deep Ellum Brewing. We're also going to talk about some tricks to use with your refractometer. We're going to talk about fining your beer to get it nice and clear. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to do a style topic on Belgian triples.
But before we get started, please be sure to check out our Patreon account to help support the show. Every little bit counts, and if you visit patreon.com/Come and Brew It Radio, we have a variety of options for you to help keep the show going, get involved, and improve it. Plus, we'd like to thank Jasper Castillo and Michael with the gratuitous Beaver Patreon avatar, for becoming patrons. We like that Beaver, Michael. Thanks for joining. I'm
Nice.
Greg.
I'm Brandon.
I'm Stubby.
I'm Barrett.
And I'm Chris.
I'm Chris.
Come on, Chris. Get up
I'm
on that
Chris.
mic.
Get up on it.
Damn new guys.
Is this better?
All right. Well, welcome back. A little bit of a rocky start there, as usual. We've got a little bit of technical issues and kind of shooting from the hip. But we have a lot to talk about tonight, so that's going to be fun. I think we're going to cover a lot of good information. A couple of tricks here that we haven't talked about before that I think are real useful information. So, and we've got Barrett Tillman in the studio with us. Barrett is the head brewer at Deep Ellum Brewing, which is in
Glad to be here.
Dallas, one of our local
Yeah.
breweries.
Deep Ellum, Dallas. Yeah.
Deep Ellum?
A brewery that's actually growing really, really fast, if I'm not mistaken, too. In the last few years here has really...
Yeah, we're definitely moving into our footprint over there.
That's good. That's good. So, welcome, Barrett. Thanks for coming on in. I guess first we want to get into some recent happenings, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the usual thing. I mean, it's another week of everybody being bought or buying each other or whatnot, or fallacious articles about new breweries. You know?
Fallacious? I like those. I've been getting
Depends
the
on
wrong
what we're
articles,
talking
I
about,
think.
you know?
Yeah. No, this the buyout news this week is actually a little bit different than normal in that Brooklyn Brewing has bought a minority stake, so less than 25%, in 21st Amendment Brewing, which is up in San Francisco, California, and Funkworks Brewing, which is in Colorado. Bought a minority stake in both of those, and the intention is for the three of them to kind of team up and combine their distribution footprint, which I guess this is something similar to what we've heard about with, was it New Belgium? Who was it that?
I know several other known breweries have done the same thing where they're helping each other out across the country just to get some distribution and whatnot. So, and
it's kind of a topic that we brought up about that week, and one of the Turning Point guys brought up, what do you think of these craft breweries teaming up with each other? And I think this is, along with what the Brewers Association is doing, where they're trying to help differentiate craft breweries and being able to make it clear to the consumer who independent breweries are. This is another step I think that I hope we see more of.
Right.
Just in terms of, combining their resources to be able to kind of take on the distribution tactics of the big guys.
They're going to have to, by the sound of it. I mean, when the big guys are buying everybody else out and just forcing everybody off the shelf for more or less, they're going to have some sort of help with each other.
Right. And, the big guys own a lot of the distributors, too.
Right, exactly.
So, in this case, these guys are going to be able to handle distribution, together.
It seems like it'll probably be a trend. We'll see more.
I hope so. I'd like to see more of it.
I think the biggest problem, though, is you got to look at, too, it has to do with the laws. Right. Depends. I mean, in Texas, you can't distribute your own beer unless you're a brew pub. So those guys that are that size, they wouldn't be able to do that. I mean, here in Texas, anyway.
Well, both Funkworks and Brooklyn are already distributing here. So I imagine it might mean that 21st Amendment, which makes great beer. I'm a big fan of 21st Amendment. I drink it whenever I'm in California. Maybe they'll be able to piggyback on distribution agreements that Brooklyn and Funkworks already have in place.
Work for sure.
Contract, the brewing happens at one place, therefore it can come here now through Funkworks or whatever, and just with the other brand.
And it's a minority stake that Brooklyn has bought, so it's less than 25%. The article I read made an interesting point in that in order to be considered a minority stake, it has to be under 25%. And in order to be an independent craft brewery, you have to be less than 25% owned by a large, corporation. And Brooklyn Brewing is 24.5% owned by Keurig. They specifically sold that much of it just so that they could still be called independent. And so there's some speculation as to what does this mean. I don't know that it means anything at all.
Right.
24.5% isn't enough to have.
You're still talking about
control
brands
over what they're doing.
Companies that are much smaller than the real big problems.
And each of these breweries is still going to operate independently. Brooklyn doesn't have say over what either one of those other two do now. They're just a minority shareholder.
Assistants.
So, I personally, I like the sound of it all the way around. I guess we'll find out as it unfolds. It's much like with a lot of these things, personally, I'm too dumb to really know the big picture on a lot of it. And you don't really find out till you see, a year later when everything kind of plays out what's going on. Like, I really don't think any of us...
More years, actually.
Yeah, I don't think any of us really have any idea what ABInbev or Miller or what their end game is on a lot of things, because it's
total domination.
They think on a higher level. Yeah, but what the methodology to it is, those guys think at a level that we don't think at all, and we can speculate, but we really don't know till it happens. So,
imagine they're just looking for something that's taking over a niche of the market, and then they want to buy that out so it's theirs.
Well, I still don't understand. I don't think anybody understands what happened with ABInbev and Northern Brewer. I don't get that still at all. And I don't think anybody does, and we're not going to until it plays out. And I think this, we don't know exactly how this is going to affect everything till it plays out either.
Right.
So, at any rate, I'm interested in it. I like to see that kind of stuff. So.
Then on the other note, the non-buyout version of things, there was the article from Forbes about Barrels and Sons. Barrels and Sons.
Yeah, that was a good article.
Yes, it's so well written in such a fictitious manner. And I don't know about the three sons, Mondavi, Bush, and I can't think of the other guy's name. Taylor, opening the brewery that's in Napa. Was it Napa?
It's a bunch of three rich
Valley.
kids that decided they didn't have anything better to do than make an American Pilsner.
Specifically,
Yeah.
an American Pilsner.
It had
Yes,
to be
origin of
made
classics.
by nobody makes an American Pilsner or something of that nature, I think is what he said.
Because everybody's making IPAs or,
Yeah.
or very sweet hoppy beers.
So they're going to make
Yeah.
Budweiser, I guess.
Mikey called us all dill holes on Facebook, by the way.
You wouldn't want to call it an American lager, you know.
Right.
Just call it an American Pilsner.
Right. Well, doesn't it say that on Miller Lite cans or something? A true Pilsner.
No, I think that's Miller Lite that says Pilsner.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
It's like I haven't seen one of those cans in person in years.
I don't know. That's a big yawn to me. If someone wants to open up a brewery and they got a ton of money and they want to do it and pat each other on the
Right.
back for it, go more power to them. If people buy it, that's great. And if they don't, they'll move on to their next little project or whatever. Right?
Yeah, more or less, But that kind of name recognition, that they'll get something out of it. It's just, boy, I tell you, that article was a complete, full-on porn blowjob of an article. It was ridiculous. It was poorly edited, and it was just it was disgusting. I mean, honestly, for
So
them,
I think
they
as
really
a
enjoyed
writer,
it. I'm
you're
sure.
offended more than anything.
I was
Yeah.
actually,
There's
And
one thing that you know of. At least they're not doing this just with the intention to sell out. I mean, they all already
Were they
did
gonna
it.
sell
You know?
Yeah, it's done. Yeah.
They're launching a new brand. You guys just don't know it.
Yeah, that could be it.
It's the American Pilsner.
Totally new. It's new and original.
Is that kind of like all American beef?
All right, so Barrett, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what's going on with Deep Ellum? We got the Labor of Love competition coming
Yes,
up.
sir.
That
This
happens
is the
Labor Day weekend every
Fifth
year.
or sixth year.
This will be the sixth year.
Sixth year,
that
okay.
We'll do it. And what I like about Labor of Love is like that's kind of where I grew up at. The first time bringing out my homebrew and serving it to thousands of people at Deep Ellum. It was just a lot of fun.
Definitely a big crowd that comes out to that every year that they've had it.
So it's changed some over the years, too. Initially, I think I was in the first one or two, and it was basically Deep Ellum would give you malt and hops, if I remember correctly, and you would go brew a beer, and then they would have a day where everybody would come and serve their beer to a crowd that showed up and judge People's Choice and that kind of thing. And there were several different awards that they gave out, if I remember right.
Yeah,
It's
it
hard to
grew.
remember what they were
It grew.
because I didn't win any of them.
Yeah, it seems to change every year
Uh-huh.
as we kind of fine tune it. One year I think the awards were painted cardboard boxes, and that
That's the year I remember doing, yeah. Uh-huh.
that didn't go over too well. But
Yeah.
the next year the awards
I
got
don't
better.
know. I'd have been pretty happy with a painted cardboard box. I just want to win something.
Just something, anything.
I think we can do better than that. Yeah.
But yeah,
So what does it become now? What's the format for it?
The format now is just to kind of do things the Deep Ellum way, throw a big party with vendors and bring out local talent, including homebrewers and their beers. But the focus is really on just beer in general. You take beer culture, which in some cases may be dying a little bit because we're fighting for these terms like independent and we're being bought out and stuff like that. But grassroots level of it all, homebrewers are still making great beer. So we're going to change up the format a little bit this year where the beers that come out are going to be judged on site. The people will come in when the gates open and they'll judge the beers as it's being poured. They'll get little voting tokens. That will be the People's Choice Award. So everyone that comes out, vote, cast a vote, People's Choice Award. We'll announce that and then we'll brew that beer for the next year, Labor of Love.
okay.
Well, while all of that stuff is going on beforehand, we're going to do a metal category competition, but it'll be best of show style. So we're not sitting back behind these score sheets, kind of hiding behind our opinion. We'll line the beers out on the tables, taste them all, put them head to head, and score them 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
And you get some really good awards. Hadn't taken any pictures yet, so don't want to tell you what they are, but just think pretty badass.
You're pretty
growlers.
much asking for, at the competition, bringing a bottle up that you bottled there. Was that what it was? Or
Yeah. Well, previously I was asking people to bottle it from the tap there, but I thought that was going to take a little bit too much time. You have to arrive early with partially warm beer. Trying to fill a bottle with partially warm beer is just going to foam. So what I'm doing this year is pass out Deep Ellum branded bottles to the homebrew stores. You guys have some. The homebrewers can come by, pick up their bottles, fill it up before they get there. When they get there, they'll hand it to us. We'll check it in. We'll judge it. We'll announce the second and third winners, so that's done. And then when the gates open, we'll announce the festival. We'll announce the winners for first place, right? And then that'll allow people to just go out, try all of those beers, hand out their voting cards, and then that's when the music starts. We'll have a good time.
Okay. Well, it's always been a good time.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be fun.
I think we were there. I think I was there for 2 or 3 of them, and it was always a good time every time. I mean, other than when it was hot as hell and sweating inside.
Yeah, it's always hot.
I remember drinking your beers inside the brewery, and all of us were just miserable as hell inside the brewery that night. And just
it's
sweating,
better
drenched,
now that it's out.
You know?
Yeah.
But
you know what though? This is Texas. If you're not going to go do things when it's hot, you're just not going to do things for like 4 months. You've got to just get out and
oh, come on, it's
endure
not 2
it,
months. It's not,
Yeah,
maybe
and-
2 months, maybe not 4.
And
Okay.
we won't force people to brew with the malts and hops that we're going to give them. We're just giving them the malts and hops as a thank you for coming out.
Okay.
Here's a replacement for your batch that you brought out. So it's going to be fun. Real fun.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun in the past, so I'm looking forward to it.
I like the format that you're going with that. It's interesting to go with that route. I mean, and it also proves that the batch that's coming in is the batch that hopefully they brewed, not one that they bottled over here, and then they're bringing something else to the actual event. And
Yeah,
you know.
and as a brewery, you want to make something that's representative of what came in.
Right.
If someone buries a dark brown barrel aged double stout in their closet, brings that in, wins with that, no one gets to try it. No one even sees that beer. It may end up winning, best of show, and we have no representation of what that was. So kind of take the guesswork out. Also to focus on a local artist. So we'll have vendors and we'll have the homebrewers there. So that'll allow the artist to kind of have a place to feel at home at the brewery, as well as really kick-ass bands. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, the music's always been good, and the brewers that come out, I mean, typically they're bringing a lot with them. There's a lot. They're really into their breweries.
Well, as with any People's Choice thing, presentation comes into it heavily. That's for sure. I know that when James and I did it, we thought we were coming pretty strong, and we showed up like, oh my gosh, these guys.
We have no T-shirts.
There
or
are some
stickers.
people that are really built for these type of things. I think Mike Treadway talked about that. Same thing. He came on out thinking he was really set for a solid showing, and there's people out there with T-shirts and koozies and stickers and big elaborate presentations and all that. But I will say that even though we didn't have that, we did very well in the people. I was very happy with how we did in the People's Choice, and it's a little bit different People's Choice than other ones that I've been to, like the Iron Mash and that kind of thing, because you're not serving your beer to homebrewers.
Yeah,
You're serving your beer to people who come to Deep Ellum every weekend. So this is your average everyday craft beer drinker that's showing up to say, hey, what can these homebrewers do? So it's personally, I thought it was more fun.
It was
to give your beer to somebody who's not a home brewer, who's not picking it apart, asking you about the recipe or anything like that. It's just some chick that likes craft beer and comes to Deep Ellum, and when she likes your beer, or some guy that's just a regular there. Personally, I almost like that a little bit better.
And that's what I think that was a good takeaway from that, because every time you'd have people that would stand and talk to you the whole time about your beers and what they liked about it. Man, I don't know why I want more of this.
Yeah, they come back for seconds. It's really, I don't know why someone with, I hate to use the word less qualified, but a less qualified opinion. They're not a brewer. They're not a judge. Something like
They're
just
just coming
somebody who
out with
loves beer. I don't know why I like that better.
It's the
hearing them
excitement.
tell me.
It's the excitement of finding something that they like right then. Because I got a third in whatever category. It was, I think, the third year or fourth year. Cherry Berliner Weiss. I had cherries in the keg. maraschino cherries.
That sounds like a delicious beer.
It was good, and I tell you what, we had like 15 people kept coming back. They'd bring more people with them, and they'd talk about it, and they were just excited, you know. And it's like, especially a bunch of women, you know. And I thought the best thing about this is that they're just giddy to try this and get their friends to try it, and you know that was the best thing. So
yeah, there's a little bit more of an honest excitement about it. Yeah. So that is a totally unique aspect of this competition of any of the other ones I've ever been in. Now, I've never done Brew Riot. I think that either. Might be or actually Brew Riot doesn't happen anymore, does it?
I don't know.
I think they changed the name to Brew Haha this year.
Did they? Okay, all right. That might be similar because that's done just kind of in the Bishop Arts District and just the general public.
Well, the Dallas side of things we're not as familiar with. I mean, Barrett's, you're from over there, from North Texas Homebrewers Association. We're not previous, how many years president?
I did president 1 year, and then I was on the board for about 3 years.
Yeah. So he's definitely used to that side, all the competitions and everything.
I love competition.
So we have almost 3 dead presidents here.
Yeah.
I'll be glad when mine's done.
At least 2.
So on that note, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be where you are at Deep Ellum?
Oh, wow. Yeah, like I said, I really felt like I grew up at Deep Ellum, especially since, you know, like Labor of Love really allows you to kind of walk through the brewery with your homebrew as if you're a little mini brewmaster of sorts, you know. So to brew in my garage in a very competitive way with my friends, and then bring our beers to something like Labor of Love, because what you see is you see the commercial side of it. You see how people get excited about the beer. You know, you get to tell the story about the beer, why you made it, how you think about process, how you think about recipe. But not only that, you know, Labor of Love has a tendency to attract the best. You know, some of the previous winners of Labor of Love, they've opened their own breweries. You know, so the drive is to get behind the people, you know, and to make the beer that the people like. So, I remember walking through the crowd at Labor of Love with this pitcher of my beer. I was like, I'm not standing behind this damn kegerator pouring beer for everybody. So it's just a lot of fun. It allows you to breathe, walk around, greet people, talk about beer. It's a lot of time in competition. It's about style, you know.
Right.
Whether your beer is in or out of style. It could be a well-made beer. It could be a great beer. It could be an amazing beer, but out of style.
Right.
Not winning any homebrew competitions.
Right.
You know. And so to be able to come out to Labor of Love and see my beers being well received and just to kind of follow the history of Deep Ellum, you know. And, you know, because they made an amazing farmhouse wit one of the years that it came out. Tried that. Get to shake the hands with the brew masters and things like that. So coming in from a homebrew perspective, where I was president of Homebrew Club and all of this stuff, and just very deep into the competitive nature of beer, when I pushed back from the desk and decided that I was going to give beer a try, it was a long road. So
it always is for that.
And I was doing some really strange beers with wild yeast and sour cultures and things.
Yeah.
like
Now
that.
you had your own line of yeast, right?
Yes,
still?
most definitely. Yeah, it's still a very boutique product.
Dry.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that one allows you to basically ferment the 4 sours. If you think about sours in quadrants, you know, you'll have the German style sour, which would be like a Berliner Weiss. You'll have an American style sour, which would be like something that's like light with lactic acid. Then you can build hops and fruit on top of that. Then you'll have your Belgian style sour. It'll have like Brettanomyces, some wild notes to it, and then it'll have the acid with it. And then you'll have something like the Flemish style, right? Be a red or a brown, and then on top of that you'll layer in these deep notes of acid and or bread, well aged, right? And so just got really good at making those styles of beer and collecting yeast from all over.
You did. I've had those beers from him at the competitions. They were really good.
So what was different about these it was a blend of yeast and bacteria in dry format, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the key to that was, you know, like you're pitching a known amount of bacteria, you're pitching a known amount of yeast. So let's say if you're going to target something like a red ale, a Flemish style, then based on your malt bill, you know where the sour is going to stop, the acid. And then you also know where the yeast is going to stop, the final gravity. And if it has Brettanomyces or not, then you're determining what funk level you're gonna have on that. And so my product just focused on the acid producers, right? It allowed people to choose their own Brett. One, because I couldn't find anybody to try Brett for me. It's a big no-no when you're speaking with the wine industry about products.
Yeah, they're absolutely paranoid about Brett.
Yeah, I think it would have been fun, but let's let the people
up.
choose their own Brett.
It'll show up. I mean, you've had the idea. I'm sure that it'll show up eventually. So.
And then after that, I got involved with Bishop Cider. Did cider for them for a while, and had a great time. Made some great things, and then still kind of loved beer. So I was working part-time in beer, working full-time in cider, and then bringing this yeast thing online. I told you it wasn't a good and always happy road. I was trying to figure out which way I was going to go in life. And then I started these contracting projects where design a beer for commission and go from there. And so it started the discussion with John Reardon, and he really believed in the ideas that I had, and he decided to bring me in.
Yeah, because you did kind of some independent work with like Cedar Creek and a couple other breweries before you ended up landing it at Deep Ellum, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And what it was is just leveraging that knowledge for, making a sour beer, using those acid producers, in a clean brewery. Because I believe that you can do it in a clean brewery if you're following safe practices. But there's areas that it's safe, such as the kettle.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So you said you were working full-time in cider?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That would be fun.
Yeah, I was master ciderist for Bishop Cider for about a year.
Sorry, one of our guys online had that little comment.
Chris's friend with his pork rinds.
Yeah.
Saying what I shouldn't be saying.
Bishop Cider, if you're in Texas and you haven't tried Bishop Cider, they are putting out some really good stuff. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I think they're coming up on their 4th year too.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I just really started buying their stuff recently. It started showing up on the shelves more commonly. Cider's really growing a lot. And I've been really impressed with everything they bought that they've made that I bought. So if you haven't tried it, go out and try some.
Yeah, they definitely have some flagships.
Yeah. So when you did get to Deep Ellum, you kind of started off with like a barrel program and sour project, right?
Yeah, and we're still doing that. My first thing that I did with Deep Ellum was the play date, right? It was kettle sour Dallas Blonde, fermented to dryness with Majot dates, and take that beer and produce a sour beer in a clean production brewery,
And I had that beer recently, and that beer is way better than it has any business being. I was nervous to order it because I'm not real big on dates. Man, that beer is really outstanding. I bought a growler of it out at What's on Tap in Keller.
Yeah, right now I think people are going to start a riot if we don't put that beer in cans. But
that's a good thing, though.
Yeah, we have a cherry version of it in the tap room that seems to be doing pretty well too. But yeah, fun stuff. Cherries and dates. The dates are in the base, and then the cherries are added on top of that.
Okay.
And both of them come through in a very restrained manner. Mm-hmm. Cherries are easy to overdo, and like I say, I'm not normally a big fan of dates. Kind of like raisins, where I don't like them very much, but I've had beers where when they're used properly, the flavor really melds in nicely with the beer, and I thought that play date was just out of this world. I really liked it.
Yeah, it's doing pretty well in the market. I mean, I think it just got rated like 92 in the list of fruited sour beers, and I was like, wow, this thing is doing well against some very respectable beers. Beers that have barrel aging characteristics and stuff like that. But I think one of the things that really sets Playdate apart is, especially in the use of what it is in the kettle, we actually use lactobacillus and pediococcus, and so
really,
it's the tandem that I think extends the beer.
Oh, really? I had not heard of that before.
Yeah,
in kettle souring.
Does the PDO turn around pretty fast still in the kettle? for that,
Well,
or?
I'm using the PDO for a specific reason, because I think that it has complexity that you don't get out of just just lactic. But PDO is also slower than lactic acid bacteria. So
you guys still getting on a brewery schedule, you still getting what you want out of a PDO on that shorter range?
Yeah, and we have to tweak it a little bit, for the brewery, because I like super sour stuff, and like when you ask people where their palate is on, say, just citrus fruit, like pineapple, grapefruits, orange, whatever, it's all over the place.
It is, yeah.
And so I had to quickly tone that back a little bit and then try to find
most sour
people's
aficionados, their level of sour is way too much for the standard first-time drinker of a sour, like even the moderate sour enjoying person, that's out there.
Well, and when we had Lauren Salazar in here, she talked a lot about the changes to La Folie and how that the acidic and sourness and that has been toned back over the years, and if that was intentional, it kind of followed her preference curve, which is very similar with mine, where at one point I was like, sour, give me as sour as you can possibly get. Like the stuff Collective is doing right now is just on the top end is sour. And anymore, I like something more along the lines of Playdate that is, there's a little bit of sourness to it, but it's still very drinkable. And
just
it's
above
not,
tart.
Yeah.
I just recently had Collective's Peach Woodfolk. That stuff was amazing.
It is. What they're doing is really great,
really
but man, it is really, really sour. James came over and brewed with me a couple weeks ago, and he brought like 4 bottles, and I'm going to have to eat a whole bottle of Rolaids to finish this stuff. And to him, it's like nothing. It's just all about your calibration and what you're into,
Didn't you say that he had given himself an ulcer from drinking all that sour?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's not good. So, yeah, that's been some of the challenges that I think we're facing as well at Deep Ellum. So that was the first beer, and then we launched this barreling project. So we have right now we have a Flemish style, or it's an American style red ale based on the Flemish approach to it. And the good thing with that beer is I believe that when I release it, it will be well balanced. It'll have really great malt profile, and then a nice little acid kiss, and that nice little acid kiss is the difficult part.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a lot of I have a lot of trouble kissing my boss's ass too, but Oh, you said acid kiss. Oh, I'm sorry.
I like kissing barrels.
I've seen pictures. I know.
Yeah, it's been in the barrels for a year and a half now. So when we release it, I hope that you guys go crazy over it, because it'll be zero blended, be batch 0, and from there we'll start a Solera project with it and just kind of build it up.
Okay.
And just the nature of bacteria as well. You start off with a project with a soft bacteria microbial load, and then that microbial load kind of builds over time. And so I'm also glad to say that, I'm going to let this thing do what it does, and we're going to not blend it, because 10 years down the road we might have to, it'll be that much bacteria.
Well, and that's kind of the beauty of those beers. It's the art to it, and the nature, and the part that's somewhat out of your control, and you kind of have to just let the indigenous fauna do what it's going to do. Or is it flora? Flora. Yeah, okay.
But
something to look forward to.
I think that's when sour beers get really good, is when you start blending them.
Right.
Really.
When you need to,
and I think that's the biggest drawback. You can probably attest to this, Barrett, but I think that's the biggest hurdle that homebrewers have to get over, is being able to learn how to blend their beers. I would say, wouldn't you say that? You've been a big sour brewer for a long time.
And that's a great question. The reason why I feel like that's a great question is because I believe that's the question that every home brewer should ask himself. Did I make a good beer?
Right.
And a lot of times I believe homebrewers just throw everything at it and they wait. They don't really know, did I make a good beer or not? But with the advent of the internet and following, people who make really great sour beers, I think that the game is changing a little bit there. You know, where we're getting these great cultures from labs, you know.
And it's also one of those things where, you know, a rising tide floats all boats, where, you know, as the homebrew community as a whole gets better, it makes people step their game up. When people they know are brewing really, really high quality stuff, you don't settle on something that's just okay, because you want to be just as good as Greg's beer, just as good as Barrett's beer or whatever, and you don't
you learn
settle
from
for
it
something.
too.
Yeah, you learn from
That's
what
a
they're
big
doing.
difference
From
versus waiting for a year to find out what happened with that beer you just threw a bunch of stuff into. Oh, well, I realized what I did wrong. Not going to wait another year to see if I got it right, you know. So
I started off with some god-awful batches of beer. And I so wanted them to be great, and they never were going to be great. And once I finally sent them down the driveway, then I felt good about myself. I was like, okay, I did it.
Right?
Yeah. And it's a learning curve, but you know, kind of back to the blending thing. I believe once you have a good solid runway of a great beer, stick with that one. Because then you can do deviations off of that, you know, whether it's fruit or sugars or different malts. But once you understand what's going on in your house batch, then I believe it's great to experiment.
And that goes back to what we preach here all the time: is make sure the fundamentals are sound before you start moving on to the other things you're playing with. There was a time when half or more of the sour beers the homebrewers were making were a beer they screwed up, and they thought, well, I'll throw some Brett in this, or I'll throw some
bread on
lacto in it. Yeah, throw some bread on it. That'll fix it. You know, where that's not the case anymore, where people have really figured out you have to make sure the beer itself is good to begin with and have that down solid before anything else is going to work, or before you can duplicate a beer, do it more than one time. Mm-hmm. And so we preach that a lot, about making sure your fundamentals are sound before you start playing with anything, like you're talking about the sugars, the fruits, and any of that stuff.
Well, you know, and one of the things that I think has changed a little bit, I know people that are truly into sour beers have really, you know, bitch about judging, but I think the judging has gotten good enough to know that there's a difference between a beer that got infected and one that actually, you know, so they set out to make a sour beer. So, you know, so that there's a lot to that as well.
Plus, more judges now have had a variety of sours to compare against versus in the past, when they may have not really had anything more than maybe one Flemish Red or one Lambic, one point in their life, and they don't like them in the first place.
Yeah, or the only thing you can get is Lindemans.
Yeah, Lindemans, yep. Exactly.
Or the Duchess. Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't like to trash beers real often, but that one, if that's your introduction to sour beers, and
you know,
you're
I think that's
they all
someplace
taste
you got to
like
start
vinegar.
though. It's kind of like that, and you know, what is it?
You could
Monk's
put
Cafe.
You could put that in olive oil and put it on your salad, dude.
Yeah.
We've got Kenny Adkins asking a question here about how do you get salty sour beers? You put salt in them.
You put
Plain
salt
and
in
simple. Any of those salty beers that you had that are sour,
Yeah,
you're
but
putting salt in the kettle. That's
you
how
have
they
to
get
be
the salty
careful with
flavor in
that.
there.
Don't just put
A light
regular
amount.
salt in it. I would put, you know, sea salt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
Nothing
it
with
better.
iodine.
Yeah, you don't want iodized salt. I use only Himalayan pink sea salt. It's been harvested off the back of a yak and carried here by a midget.
That sounds quite disgusting.
I don't know.
Yeah, now you're just making everybody's gonna be offended. Now all the midgets are gonna call, dude. What the hell? Small people, excuse me.
You mean
It's
the little people?
The little people.
Yeah.
That's what they call.
Small
Small
people?
is small
Really?
people.
It's okay as long as it goes through the boil, right?
Yeah, Kenny, it is that simple. When you're tasting salt in a beer, they put salt in the kettle. That's what it is. In fact, I've got
And not a lot.
a saison we're drinking right now that's got salt and grapefruit in it, and it's just that's like some kind of. I was joking when
And
I
if
said
you're talking
pink
about-
Himalayan, but I think it's pink Himalayan salt.
And if you're talking about like a specific style like the Goza or whatever, I mean, a lot of that was based off the salinity of the actual water they brew with in the first place back in the days. I mean, you know, that's not very much salt. I don't know what who's coming out with like a highly salted version of anything that's not a
Oh
Goza.
man, I've had that's not a Goza.
That's a sour and not a Goza.
Well, this beer that I brought in, that salted grapefruit saison, was inspired by Breckenridge. Did a salted grapefruit saison.
Did they?
A friend of mine went there, had it, said we got to try and make a beer like this. And so that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head that they're
But
putting
not a
salt in.
sour. That's the thing. I was like
Right.
sour and
Sometimes
salty.
you get some salt in darker beers, like Martin House has a
Right.
pretzel beer that has
Yeah,
Hints.
that's true. That's a good
Which
point.
has gone by the wayside.
Yeah, that's a
They
shame.
don't make it anymore.
I loved that beer.
Two of them down now, huh?
Will is asking how much salt in a 5-gallon batch. I
if you're
honestly
making a
don't know that.
Goza?
I honestly don't know that.
Goes about 1 ounce, maybe. Wouldn't you say?
Or less.
I would
Or
say
less.
in anywhere between 10 to 25 grams. I think in terms of grams, dry weight.
And
Huh.
it's one of those things too that probably
What is it, 22 and a half? for an
underkill is
ounce?
the rule.
Something like that.
23.2, I believe.
Something like that, yeah.
Because you could add more salt post fermentation.
Yeah.
If you got it and thought this doesn't have enough salt in it, you could add it into the keg.
Because
if
you can't
wanted to.
take it away.
You
Right.
can,
You can't take it away.
you can blend it out, as Stubby would say.
Right.
Would it matter what, how fine the grind was for that? How
Nope,
the
because it
flavor would come out?
no,
Not
it's
if you're weighing it
dissolves.
by the grain. It
No,
would
it-
if you just put. Oh, I'm just gonna put a half a cup in there.
Yeah, you can super saturate it, I guess, but
Yeah.
that wouldn't taste very good.
It's the beer that makes you thirstier.
Yeah.
If you can float in it really well, you're not gonna like drinking it.
So have you guys tried that? Have you tried the? What do you think of the Dogfish Head? The
sea urchin or something like that.
sea.
I liked
something.
Yeah.
When I tried it.
And what was it called? I can't remember what it's called.
Sequench.
Sequench, that's
what
it.
was.
Yeah.
It has a lot of ingredients in it. It's the Dogfish Head way.
Right.
It's like limes and
limes,
sea
black
salt,
limes,
yeah,
sea salt, and
some other stuff.
yeah,
I-
black
yeah,
sea salt.
I had it on the beach, so I thought it was quite fitting there. But I mean, it was very refreshing. And supposedly, I saw an article this week saying that they actually brewed that to actually help rehydrate you. rather than
Yeah, well, in
dehydrate.
typical Dogfish Head fashion, there's a story that goes along with it where they scientifically determined that this beer does not dehydrate you; that it actually is hydrating, like drinking Gatorade or something like that. Yeah.
Well,
Has electrolytes. yeah.
well, I actually
Has
think that
electrolytes.
he actually partnered in with the guy from Gatorade.
Well,
so.
in the article I read, it said that technically any beer that's like 4.5% or lower, if I remember correctly, there I may be wrong on the
I was
percentage
thinking it was
there.
4.2, but
Yeah, would it will not dehydrate, will actually hydrate you, and so I think that's probably all they had to do was hit the right ABV, and it fit their story there. I don't know.
Sounds like marketing.
but it's got electrolytes.
Is it what your body
It's
craves?
what plants crave.
It's what plants crave. That's what definitely.
Well, anything coming up in the future that you want to talk about that Deep Elm's working on for us to keep our eye out, or is it all top secret? Or?
Oh no. I mean, we talk about everything. I mean, you can't replicate what we're doing at Deep Elm. So, yeah, the next beer that's going to come out of the barrel program would be Four Swords.
Okay,
That's one of our flagship beers.
Four Swords is an excellent beer.
That one's going to hit the market probably like
It's a quad, right?
September. or so.
Barrel aged quad, right?
Yeah,
Barrel aged quad. Yeah.
it's good beer.
I happen to have a barrel aged quad here.
Ooh, nice. Let's try it.
Well.
And then after that, I'll get Freak Flag out, which would be that sour red ale I keep talking about. That's just sitting in barrels, and we'll have some fun to close out the year. Coming up next is going to be Dallas Blonde birthday party at Katy Trail Ice House, and we just bought a horse. So if you want to see Dallas Blonde run a race, it'll be at the horse races.
Oh, like a
Lone Star
racehorse,
Park.
not just
Yeah.
a horse to keep around and like a
thoroughbred.
Clydesdale or something like that.
It's a real horse.
the brewery.
Yeah, that would be fun.
It adds a little bit of extra.
That
yeast
sounds
to
like
the-
an idea that came up late on a Friday night at the brewery or something. Like, we should do.
Scare a horse.
We should get a horse, man.
That was one of those things that wasn't quantified the next day, but it still happened.
I've always wanted a horse.
Yeah, so we have a horse at Lone Star Park. It'll be racing this
Oh,
Sunday.
cool.
So bet on it.
Absolutely.
Good, man.
Okay, well, cool. Let's move on to a couple other things we're going to talk about. We're going to get into beer findings and that kind of thing. But I did something recently. We've talked about this a few times on the show before, and I wanted to actually get some empirical evidence on it. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised by the results. And so we get asked a lot about using a refractometer on fermented beer. which does not work the same as using a refractometer on just wort. And the way a refractometer works is it measures the way light refracts through the liquid, and thereby it measures the dissolved solids that are in the wort, and which for the most part are sugars, and so you can determine your gravity. Once alcohol is present, that changes the way the light refracts through it, and so it doesn't work the same.
It's lighter than water.
Right. So if you put fermented wort on a refractometer, the reading you're going to get is not going to be correct. Now, there are tools out there to compensate for that and to tell you what it actually is. And a couple times when it's been brought up, probably several times on the show, I think I just repeated something I had heard a lot, that they're not real accurate. And I got to thinking, well, I've never actually tried it. I should try it and see how accurate it is. So I tried it on 3 different things this week. One was, I'm doing some testing for that Plato digital airlock that we talked about before. If you haven't seen what that is, I think their Kickstarter is closed now, but you should go check it out anyway. It's PLAATO. It's a digital airlock that's going to measure the amount of CO2 that's given off by the beer, and you can track on your phone where your fermentation is at. And I'm testing it out, and I really like it so far. It's really cool. And we'll have some more information on that later. But I did a little 3-liter batch of just water and corn sugar to test this thing out on. So it's basically malt liquor. Is when it comes. It's Zima without the lemon and lime in it.
What is it going to be after you distill it?
Now that I would never do that. That would be a felony. So anyway, I've got this 3 liters of this clear malt liquor at home that is started at 1046, ended at 1020, and I took that and I took a refractometer reading and I put it in my little program. Beersmith has a tool, and I've also got an app on my phone called Brewzor, BREWZOR. It's just a little calculator app. It's got all kinds of
variety of tools.
Useful tools and stuff like that. It's an Android app. And what I realized, and I guess I had never really opened one of these up and looked at it before, is that in order for these things to make their calculations, you have to have your refractometer reading, and you also have to know your original gravity. And it takes those 2 things and it figures out what it is. And so I did it in that little 3-liter batch of corn sugar malt liquor. I did it with an English bitter that I've got that's finished fermenting, and I did it with a mead that I've got that's in the middle of fermenting. So it's 1046 original gravity, 1060 original gravity, and 1101 original gravity. Kind of covered the whole spectrum. And what I found was that it was dead on. It was exactly right with all 3 of them.
Against hydrometer readings?
Against hydrometer readings,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was actually easier to use. I'm just taking a few drops out and putting it on my digital refractometer. It's a lot better than having to pull a full sample tube, sanitize a wine thief, all that. I've just got these little...
So you have a digital refractometer. I wonder if it was different with a light one. I imagine it would be.
Digital's just easier to use. It's the same thing. You're getting a Brix reading out of it. What I also discovered, and I didn't realize that this was in there, was because you're using those 2 measurements and it's then figuring out the 3rd measurement, it can also take your final gravity as measured by a hydrometer and then your refractometer reading, and it takes those and it can tell you what your original gravity was. And in all 3 cases, it was exactly right on that too. And I thought, that's something I've never even heard of. And all the time we do these big brews with our club where we brew a big 3-barrel batch of beer and everybody splits it off, and then inevitably a few days later on the forum, does anybody remember what the original gravity was on that? Or, I talked to
every time
to home brewers and ask them, and they didn't make notes or they don't remember what it is or anything like that. And so that's a really useful tool that you can go back and figure out what your original gravity was and then figure out what your ABV is on the beer.
I'd been wondering for a while if there was a way to do that. Because I get questions from people who are a little more novice. I get the question from people who are a little more novice than me, asking, how do I figure out my ABV? I'm like, oh, you need your original gravity. And they go, what's gravity?
Right. A lot of beginning homebrewers don't record that at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're just concentrating on adding hops and sanitizing things and that kind of thing. They don't think it's real important. I have a recipe. I followed it. It should be what it says the recipe is, and they don't take a recording of it. And when people bring beers into the shop and ask an opinion about what a flaw or something like that they think is in there, Well, what was your originally gravity?
First question.
I don't know.
Yeah, always.
So I thought that was really interesting. And
so have you measured it down to complete terminal where it gets below the gravity of water as well?
Oh no, below 1.0. No, I haven't.
Okay.
No. So that's a good question. The mead that I'm doing right now should get down there, and I'll try that when I do it.
I hadn't even noticed that because that's what I was just been looking at. Was like, where was that at? That's under the refractometer tool, but you have to. They have fermented. They have unfermented, fermenting, and then from finished beer on there. So.
Yeah, and that was what was weird to me is when I opened it up, I looked. Well, I want to look at the gravity of finished beer, so I pulled that up, and it asks you for your hydrometer reading. And then your refractometer reading, and I thought, well, why would I need this if I know what my hydrometer reading is? And then I realized what it was telling me I could do.
Right.
And what you want to use if you're wanting to find out the gravity of beer with alcohol in it is the one that's fermenting wort.
Right.
The one that says finished beer original gravity lets you figure out what your original gravity was, and it was right on all three of those that I tried. That was in a wide range of starting gravities. Now, none of them were below 10-20 finishing, so that's a good
Sounds like an
question.
alcohol by weight calculation.
Yeah, and I think that's the key is that a lot of times there's a specific extract version, then there's what we get with standard gravity, and then there's alcohol by weight, which goes with that specific extract. And I was going to say, how many tools did you try, and did you find the same
tried
thing
both the
across all of
Beersmith
them?
and the Brewzor,
Okay.
which are identical in their interface and
Right.
and the information that they ask for, and they were identical in their results too. I'm sure there's several more out there. I don't know if BrewPal.
Well, that's the question when people ask it's usually answered with, well, yeah, you can get it, but there's going to be a lot of math involved, and you need a lot of detail to get to that
and
point.
what I had
versus-
heard was that each calculator would give you different answers. That they were kind of all over the place.
I've
and
heard
that-
a lot of variation. I hadn't really used the calculator.
I was surprised to find out how accurate it was. And for me too, one of the things when you're talking about your final gravity,
Is it climbing out of there?
no, it's
No,
good,
it's
man.
just foggy.
When you're talking about your final gravity, this actually gives you a more accurate reading unless you have one of those hydrometers that's intended just for final gravity that lets you read it real accurately. Try to read the difference between 1020 and 1021 on a regular hydrometer.
Right.
You're guessing really. You're
Right.
ballparking it. So I thought that was really interesting, and I won't ever encourage anybody not to try it anymore, which I've done in the past, and I guess was a
You've
mistake.
proven it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the advantages is if you don't have to waste any of that really good brew you just made, I don't anyway. I drink the sample, but
You definitely don't need as much for a refractometer, so that's a key. Plus, when you've spent the money for a good one, or whatever, you have one there, you've got another use for it, and that's the thing where we've told a lot of extract brewers over time, it's really geared more towards, the multiple stages of all grain brewing. But with an extract brewer, it's your finishing version, your finishing gravity, and your starting gravity and your finishing gravity. So it's at the end of the boil and at the end of the fermentation now. Makes it worth buying that refractometer.
Just for me, it's the ease of it. I can sanitize a pipette in a little mason jar that I've got with some Star San a lot easier than, oh, well, my Star San's been sitting in this bucket. I got to mix up a new batch and get out my thief and all that. It's just, and wash my hydrometer off when I'm done and everything. This is so much easier. So at any rate, I just thought I'd throw that out there. I thought it was
Thank you, sir.
very interesting. So.
Really
Proven
appreciate that.
facts.
So this is my barrel aged quad that I'm pouring right now. It's
good.
it's a much lower alcohol than I normally do. Normally when I do this beer, it's 12% or so, and I'll put bread on it, and that I brought it down to about 9%. Low alcohol. It's a session quad.
We're gonna call it a dark strong.
yeah, dark strong.
Get back to style. Dark
Tasty.
strong.
I left it on the oak a little bit longer than I should have. I think it's pretty strong oak flavor, but good. I think I like it. Stubby, you need to get some.
Stubby's in there holding his head like something went wrong again.
Yeah,
I don't know. He also pointed out, I think, we're 50 minutes in? Okay. Do we want to go ahead and start on findings before we move on to triple and take a break?
Let's do that.
Or do you want to take a break? Stubby says take a break. I think something went wrong.
All right.
Okay.
We're going to take a break,
Take a
drink some
break.
quad. Come on back. We're going to talk about findings and get into Belgian triples.
Many colored death time.
And when I say get into Belgian triples, I mean we're going to get into some Belgian triples.
Totally in.
Yeah. So here we got the Many Colored Death, which has kind of become our house band coming up. Listen, when you like it, go to iTunes or Stitcher or iTunes or Spotify or whatever and look them up. They're out of Columbia, Missouri. Good friend of mine. Fantastic band. Check them out.
We're still recording.
Does anybody have Brew Pal?
Or maybe we weren't live the whole